What did you do then?
Your phone was on the table vibrating, and I thought that might get picked up by the mic, so I moved it on the soft floor.
You just confused me.
I was trying to do it surreptitiously.
Yeah, you didn't.
Okay. I mean, some of us put our phone on silent and airplane mode during recording, so we could be professional and stuff. But no, it's fine. I'm the one who's not taking this seriously.
You just put words in my mouth there.
Just put him down and ignore him. It is Thursday, the 22nd of February 2018, and you're listening to Skeptics with a K, the podcast for science, reason and critical thinking. Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society, a non-profit organisation for the promotion of scientific skepticism on Merseyside, around the UK and internationally. I am your host, Mike Hall. With me today is Marsh.
Hello.
And Alice.
Hello.
So, my cat died last year, as you're both aware.
Yes.
But my other cat's not been well.
Yeah, I heard, man.
So I had two cats. I now have one cat. And I got them like within a week of each other. So they're both quite old cats.
Did they get on?
Yes, they got along okay.
Because
yeah.
I rarely ever saw them both at the same time, apart from when they were eating.
When they were kittens, they would kind of cuddle up with each other. As adult cats, they it wasn't so much people say, oh, the cat, they tolerate each other. They would go up and groom each other occasionally. They weren't close, but they weren't hostile to each other either. But I got them within, as I say, I got them as kittens within a week of each other. So they've kind of grown up together, even though they weren't from the same litter. Marwood, the cat that I've got now, he is 18 next month. So he's quite an old cat. But he's not been very well. He's going off his food, and he's always enjoyed his food. He's always been a big fan of his food.
He is a big fella.
He is a big cat, yeah.
Stocky cat.
He's a great big chunk of a cat. So I took him to the vet. And said, oh, my cat's not well, he's kind of off his food. And I don't know if you remember when I talked about when I went to the vet with Nell, I've got this strange kind of East European vet.
All right, Brexit.
Who talks like he's a spy in a 1950s kind of Cold War film.
I think if I had a vet that sounded like they were talking like they were a spy, it would make it sound like any diagnosis they were giving was code.
It does sound like that.
Yeah, it's like, oh yeah, the cat is off its food. Like the next thing you hear is a lot of tanks pull out of the Kremlin.
But every time he calls me up to give me an update on how my cat's doing, he does it while he's having a crafty little cigarette out the back.
Right,
of the,
yes, I remember you saying.
On the cordless phone. So he phones me up.
On the cordless phone?
On the cordless phone. The practice got a cordless phone. So he stands out the back on the practice phone going, your cat is constipated. I go, really? Yes. You should leave him with me.
You're going French, though. You're going French resistance on this Eastern European accent.
He says, leave your cat with me.
We have
a device that we can insert inside him that will make him poop. I go, okay. This is literally what he said to me. I'm putting on the accent for comic effect, but that's literally what he said. He said, if that does not work, we shall give him an enema. So he said, leave the cat with me. So I left the cat with him. And turns out that's what it was. My cat was constipated, very badly constipated, which is kind of a comedy ailment to have, but obviously is actually quite serious when it comes down to it. Yeah. So he called me up after they'd used this device, that whatever this device is, that was going to make my cat poo. And he says, your cat has pooped. Smoking on his cigarette. Your cat has pooped. It's really, and as I say, the tanks start rolling out of the Kremlin.
Yeah. The only better thing was if he phoned you up and you answered, well, hello, and you said, your cat has pooped. And then the phone goes down.
He goes, after he pooped, we try to give him bath. We try. Your cat, he turned into a panther. That was very French, that one.
That was very French.
But yeah, so my cat then attacked the vet when they tried to give him a bath.
Gotcha.
Your cat doesn't really like other people.
He doesn't like people at all. So I got him back from the vet and he's kind of okay and he's on the mend, having had an enormous shit, which is apparently all that he needed, and then attacked the Russian vet.
Nice.
So that was fun. That was entertaining. So my cat's not well, but hopefully he's on the mend.
He's on the mend.
I hope he's okay.
Nice. My cat's doing all right. Although my cat today, as I was working, has just decided that my hand moving the mouse was a sign that my hand needed to be attacked, like it was evil and needed to be attacked,
Well,
and then was food. Yeah, so I was literally working, and every time my hand moved at all, she'd pounce on my hand, roll upside down on my hand, rub the back of her neck on my hand, then turn over and bite my wrist.
Nice.
So that was like 10 minutes I didn't get back of my day. But
You
she's
need to
not
just
to do
put
it.
her on the floor and tell her no.
Apparently, that's the thing you're meant to do. Is if you can't ever show us any love or affection, you immediately put the cat down on the floor, tell it no, and ignore her. That's the way to train a cat and to have a fulfilling pet owner relationship.
And Alice, you talked for Merseyside Skeptics recently.
I did
and
last
that was
week.
very good.
In our Skeptic bunker.
In the Skeptic
We
bunker,
were in the bizarre
deep
Skeptic
underground,
bunker.
in the Swedish Skeptic bunker.
But I thought it was a very good talk. It was very well attended. And if you're a Skeptics in the pub, you should book Alice.
Yeah, I've only got Nottingham booked now.
How many have you done now, though? You've done quite a few.
12 or 13 maybe.
That's not bad going. That's pretty good guns.
And if you're a major international conference, fucking hands off her. She's ours.
There was a bit of your talk that we mentioned before we started recording. That was my favourite part of the talk for entirely inappropriate reasons.
Yeah.
Where you highlighted that Liverpool, was it?
It used to be the cancer capital of Europe.
Yeah, dubious title in and of itself, isn't it?
The cancer capital of Europe for a few years.
Yeah, at which point the entire audience boos. Like, oh, Liverpool's the cancer capital of Europe. I was like, oh, boo.
At which point I pointed out that it had recently been overtaken by Manchester.
At which point the audience erupted in applause. Hey! Wildly inappropriate. Brilliant, though.
It's
Absolutely
just
brilliant.
everybody was in on the joke.
Yeah, everyone together spontaneously.
We don't have that many members of the audience who are particularly Scouse, who are particularly patriotic about their region, any of that. But it was just like, this was the perfect moment for an entire group to be in on a joke.
It was. We were a group populace together as one Scouse in that moment. It reminds me, I saw 28 Days Later when that came out. I saw that at the cinema in Liverpool. And there's the bit which is meant to be like a kind of dun-dun bit where they're going to Manchester to find where the broadcast signal's coming from. And as they get to the edge of the M60, they see that Manchester has been razed to the ground and has just been levelled by fire. At which point, the audience in Liverpool cinema started cheering. It panned across Manchester as a desolate wasteland. Hey! Like that was the moment of levity for the people watching the film.
At this point, I'd like to say hello to Jeff and Rick from
hello to the Great Manchester Skeptics Society. I'd also like to say to people, come to QED in Manchester. It's good. It's good.
We did go to Manchester though on Saturday, which is like 2 days after my talk.
We did go to Manchester.
We voluntarily
we didn't
went
get cancer
to Manchester.
There. We might have got cancer there. We are yet to find out whether we got cancer there.
It could be undiagnosed at this point, that's true.
If we did both get cancer, having been to Manchester, then we'd really have to take a long, hard look at what's going on in Manchester.
It's not enough information.
What, the two of us going to Manchester and then 2 days later?
But we also did other things.
I know, but if we both...
And you don't...
And we're young.
You're not exposed to a thing and immediately get cancer 2 days later. That's not how... I literally gave you a lecture on how cancer works
but that's
3 days ago.
That's why
and you're still showing no understanding of how cancer works.
What about if the little tumours are going, all right there, mate, yeah, sort it, yeah.
But that's why we'd have to have a long, hard look at what's going on in Manchester.
It wouldn't be that long, hard a look. It would be probably not Manchester.
Or whatever we knew about cancer is wrong, because Manchester, blimey, that's got it going on right now on the old cancer. But anyway, yes, we were in Manchester.
We went to Manchester on Saturday to see a band called The Lovely Eggs, who we were supported by two acts, one of which was a band we'd never heard of before called Mr. Ben and the Bends.
They were really
good.
I really liked them. He looked like a sort of a knockoff version of Jack White.
He looked a lot like
Jack Off White. Jack Eggshell White.
And they were really, really good.
Hang on, not like Jack Off White.
I mean, that's where I went.
That's exactly where
I was thinking.
I didn't go there.
Who is White?
Well, yeah, I didn't go there.
And what's he done to deserve this treatment?
So we saw them, and then we saw Porky the Poet, who is Phil Jupitus.
All right, okay.
And he's really, really good. I've not seen him before. You've seen him before.
Yeah, I've seen him before. I think maybe once or twice. And he was really good because he was like a punk poet who used to support bands in he supported the Who Am I Trying Style Council. He supported Madness. He supported several kind of other bands. And he was there. He donated his entire anything he got paid for the gig, which wasn't that much, he said anyway. But he donated it all to Arts Emergency, which is the charity and initiative that Josie Long started to try and get arts back into humanities and things back into the sort of working class.
Good.
At times of austerity, which is great. But he was really good. He did get heckled.
He did get
by
heckled.
A knobhead.
Like in the middle of a dramatic pause that he'd been cultivating this pause for quite a while. Somebody shouted partway through, which was really, really annoying. But he called him a cunt. And
he properly eviscerated him. Went in really, really hard. Yeah.
And then kept coming back to it and telling him off repeatedly throughout the rest of his set.
Yeah. But he was good. And then we saw the Lovely Eggs, who were great. They're kind of a DIY punk, sort of surreal, I'd say.
They're very bizarre.
Their lyrics make almost no sense at all. They've got songs about a man who's a magic onion.
Okay.
He is a magic onion.
British eggs or American eggs? Do they have a cuticle where the chicken's vaccinated? You
can't keep them in the fridge.
Can't keep them in the refrigerator. No. Okay.
They're from Lancaster. It's a husband and wife, and they've got like a 4-year-old that they tour with because they were like, I don't really want to give this up. Fuck it, we'll carry on, shall we? But they're really, really good, and they're incredibly northern, and there's not much kind of going on. They're very lo-fi. But the thing is, because they're pretty punk and they're kind of northern punk, they attract like people like us who like a bit of punk, who like kind of a DIY music singing kind of thing. They also attract men in their late 40s or like early 50s who remember the back end of punk the first time around and think this is their youth back and then want to be absolute pricks to people in the middle of a gig.
Right.
And so that happened with this one guy, relatively early in their set. He'd clearly done enough to piss off the people behind us that he entered our life when a couple of people behind us, pushed him a full brutal shove to get him away from whatever the fuck he was doing. And he sent him careening forwards into the crowd. And so he's in front of us. Immediately then turns around aggressively to try and get retribution for this shove. Realised has no idea who did it and almost like took a swing at me or Nicola before he realised what was going on. Then he started trying to talk to you and Nicola.
Yeah, he kept backing into me, and I can be a bit of a dick at gigs. I don't like people encroaching on my space.
No.
Unsurprisingly, but I don't.
I'm not sure that's being a dick. I think.
But the thing is, most people would give way and would step into a space and let the other. But I don't. I push my arm out and push them back and make them go. So I kept pushing my arm out to push, like not pushing, but like just pressing to say, I am in this space, you are not coming into this space. And he kept turning around to me and looking aggressively, at which point I just looked blankly ahead and completely ignore the fact that he's turned around.
Yeah, and then he went to like talk to Nicola. He went to put his hand on Nicola's face or kind of around.
I didn't see what he did, but he turned around
put his hand on her face to talk to her.
Yeah.
So I put my hand up and went, no, mate, we don't do that. That's ridiculous. And then he was like, don't you ever fucking touch me again, mate. I was like, oh, all right, fuck off. But yeah, just this weird, aggressive, little old man.
Lovely.
And he was
he's tiny.
Yeah, he was really tiny. It's one of the shortest gigs I've ever been to.
Yeah,
the audience were, I'd say, a clear 4 inches on average shorter than me.
You don't mean they were only on stage 15 minutes. You mean
they were also on a short amount of time.
Okay.
Not like the Fall level of short, but still pretty short.
In two different respects, one of the shortest gigs.
Yeah, they were for about an hour.
The audience were pretty short compared to normal gigs we go to. But yeah.
Yeah, second shortest in terms of height audience I've ever been to. The first would have been Tegan and Sarah, mainly because their audience was almost exclusively lesbians. So it was already a very female audience.
Right.
So the percentage skew was very much lower in terms of height because there weren't as many men there.
After little skinhead dickhead fucked off, 2 other guys careened through us to get into the space in front of us, and they were really tall and stood right in front of me for the rest of the gig.
Also, the Lovely Eggs brought with them their own hangover dowser, who for 10 pence would douse whether you were going to get a hangover or not, and for £1 would take it away.
Okay.
Yeah, that was really weird.
It was quite weird. They were obviously taking the piss.
They brought her on stage and she tried to get the entire audience to crouch on the floor.
Yeah. And quite a lot of the audience did, in fairness.
A lot of people tried, but then you get to a point where everybody's like stood in quite a small amount of space, so then they tried to crouch and you just knees into backs into...
that sounds terrible.
It was quite funny.
So would you recommend the Lovely Eggs?
I would highly recommend the Lovely Eggs. They're really good. They're almost impossible to describe to somebody without them sounding really shit, but they're not. They're great.
I know I talk about cancer quite a lot. I'd actually rather not. I love cell biology and pretty cell signaling pathways. I am more than just a one-trick pony. I know about things other than cancer. I can cover all sorts of diverse and interesting topics, but the media just keeps on with the misrepresentation of cancer stories, and it affects so many of us that it feels necessary to look at the details of these stories.
So, Alice, if tomorrow we cured cancer and it all just went away, which I think from your talk you said we're pretty close to anyway. But if tomorrow you could, would you be happy, or would you be like, oh man, there's like an entire section of stuff that I do for Skeptics I can't do anymore, and B, my qualification is like...
I'm a cell biology
cell
biologist by training. Like, cancer is one aspect of my area of expertise, but as soon as cancer goes away, not that it's ever going to, but if it were, the next thing is neurodegenerative diseases.
But that's
and
like
other
saying,
things.
like, I'm an expert bird handler, but that bird was the dodo. It's like a lot of your expertise by that point will be useful.
You just don't understand how cells work. I literally told you how cells work as well. Like, there's so many diseases that are affected by how cells work.
You know I'm taking the piss, and you still can't help but rise to it. You're still annoyed, even though you know I'm just winding you up.
I talk about cancer because it's an area that affects a lot of people, and the assumption is that I am just a cancer researcher, but that's not what I'm trained in. I'm trained
Mike's
in
just
cell
a
biology.
conspiracy theorist.
That's gone now.
No longer. You've lost it. You've lost your specialism.
So someone went into Wikipedia and took it out, and then emailed us to say this is what we've done.
I might go back and put it in. I'd say I can cite sources. We've talked about it loads on this show. We have on many occasions on this show pointed out that you are an expert in conspiracy theorists. We've said that many times, specifically on this show.
You have a conflict of interest. You cannot edit that article.
I'll ask someone else to do it. I can even point them to episodes where we've said it.
That's still a conflict of interest.
Nice to Mike. Mike looks after the entire podcast for us.
I will just mention it to somebody who A, might listen to this show, and B, might know how to use Wikipedia, and they'll go back and find the episode of the show and insert the reference to conspiracy theorists back in. I don't know where I'll be able to say reach listeners to this show who...
I think what we need to do, Alice, is when he's being a dick like this, we need to put him down and ignore him. Just set him to one side. Don't give him the attention that he's craving.
So here we go again on cancer. All the big media outlets covered this one: the BBC, The Independent, I Fucking Love Science, The Guardian, The Times, The Telegraph. The Daily Mail headline reads, processed foods are driving up rates of cancer. Major study reveals the health threat, including cereal, energy bars, sausages and chocolate. They just had to sneak sausages in there in reference to a previous study, because actually the study that they're talking about doesn't mention sausages at all.
Oh, okay. Really? Good.
Just wanted to slip it in there. The bullet points say, eating processed food significantly raises the risk of cancer. Experts have said the disease is claiming more lives because of the popularity of ready meals. Sugary cereals and fizzy drinks also dangerous. The wide-ranging study found families are told to heed the warning and read food labels more carefully.
Because of the popularity of ready meals.
Remember, this is what the Daily Mail is specifically saying that this study says.
Well, remember that you put a ready meal in the microwave, so it's probably the microwave that's causing cancer as well. It's probably that.
The Guardian headline was, ultra-processed foods may be linked to cancer, says study. I'm not going to pick on the Daily Mail. I'm going to start with the article from The Guardian, which says, ultra-processed foods made in factories with ingredients unknown to the domestic kitchen may be linked to cancer, according to a large and groundbreaking study. The study in question is one from nutritional epidemiologists in France, where almost 105,000 participants aged 18 and older were surveyed by a series of online questionnaires. This is part of a massive observational study which began in 2009, taking information from the NutriNet Santé cohort. They took 8 years of data from this cohort, which takes all sorts of information from participants. So it's not just designed to measure diet, but it's data presented. But this is the data that they present in this particular paper. So participants were required to log their food intake for 2 to 3 non-consecutive periods of 24 hours over a 2-week period every 6 months. So every 6 months they had to do 2 to 3 24-hour periods.
What is the definition of a cohort, by the way? Because whenever I hear it, I immediately think of something a bit nefarious. And then I realise it's because I'm joining it up with cahoots. Okay. Like a cohort that's in cahoots. And I don't know whether there is an etymological link between cohorts and cahoots.
It's just a group.
But is it a group that's in cahoots? What is a cahoot?
I don't know.
You're asking the wrong people. You're the English graduate.
I'm not an etymologist.
Well, I'm a web developer and Alice is a cell biologist.
That's true.
How the fuck should we know?
All right. Listeners, what's a cahoot? No, don't. We'll Google it before then. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
If your phone wasn't on airplane mode, you could Google it. The researchers also took into account other factors such as income and educational level to relay social demographic, smoking activity levels and supplement intake to relay lifestyle, as well as BMI, height and health status, including family history of disease and drug use, including medication. Participants also must declare any health events through an annual health status questionnaire or specific checkup questionnaires given every 3 months, or at any time the participant feels necessary to update their health status on the website. From the data collected, the researchers then categorised the food intake using a classification system called NOVA, which splits food into ultra-processed, processed ingredients, or unprocessed/minimally processed foods. In this study, they focus on the ultra-processed food, which they described in a podcast with the BMJ. It's actually quite a good podcast. So the BMJ was the journal that published the study. They did an interview with the lead on this study and talked about what they defined as NOVA classified ultra-processed foods. So they said that it was food that is mass-produced and has substances other than culinary ingredients added. But in the study itself, they say that the ultra-processed food group is defined by opposition to the other NOVA groups, which is one of the major criticisms of this study. The category is really vague.
Okay, so what they mean ultra-processed is everything that isn't something else?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
The authors say they included, up to 1st January 2017, we included 104,980 participants without cancer at baseline who provided at least 2 valid 24-hour dietary records during their 2 first years of follow-up. Participants contributed person time until the date of diagnosis of cancer, the date of last completed questionnaire, the date of death, or 1st of January 2017, whichever occurred first. Which to me suggests there's a really high chance of missing data between the first 2-year follow-up and the point at which the patient stops counting. Because they're only looking at patients who had 2 valid 24-hour dietary records in their first 2 years, and then they could have been diagnosed with cancer in the end of 2016 if they've enrolled in 2009, done their 2 valid records in the first 2 years, and then diagnosed in 2016. There's a gap of 2011 and 2016.
Yeah.
That their diet could have drastically changed in that space of time. Of course, another major issue to highlight here is that using the years from 2009 to the end of 2016 isn't really representative of lifetime risk. But lifetime studies are difficult to do, so we can overlook that for the moment. The authors then did some statistical modelling to take into account a range of confounders, including age, BMI, activity, smoking status, and alcohol intake. And they reported a 10% increase in ultra-processed foods in the diet corresponds to a 12% increase in cancer diagnosis and an 11% increased risk in breast cancer diagnosis.
Okay.
They didn't find an increased risk in prostate or colorectal cancer. Although they do point at something being like near significant, which drives me mad and drives a lot of researchers mad. There's a hashtag on Twitter that I love, hashtag still not significant, because a lot of papers do this where they're like, it's approaching significance.
Yeah. Although I'm guilty of the opposite. When something's a p-value of 0.04, 0.03, I'll go, it's barely fucking significant.
But at least then, like, the 0.5 is a low bar for significance. Like, there's other areas of like science where they raise the bar significantly. It's not like saying there's going to be an area where like, oh, it's 0.1. It's fine. It's fine. P of 0.1 with this is still grand in this particular area.
Some people suggest that 0.01 should be the bar for significance. Yeah. And there's a pressure from some scientists to do that.
It's a bit like when you're late for something, which I frequently am, and you go, yeah, but I was nearly on time. you weren't on time. So you can't say, I was approaching timely. I was approaching punctuality. No.
They then looked at specific types of food within the ultra-processed category, and which ones contribute to an increased risk, and only found statistical significance in beverages, sugary products and fats in total cancer risk, and just sugary products for breast cancer. Other categories they looked at included starchy foods, fruit and veg, dairy, salty snacks, meat and fish, and processed meat. So from this observational study, they do report an increase in cancer diagnosis in participants who eat a lot of ultra-processed foods. And they do take into account other things that are known to increase our risk of cancer. Which is an important point. According to stats from Cancer Research UK, 42% of diagnosed cancers are preventable based on our lifestyles. The biggest contributor being smoking tobacco, which accounts for 19%. But then there's other things like eating plenty of fruit and vegetables, eating fibre, keeping a healthy weight, keeping alcohol intake low, and avoiding too much exposure to sun are all protective against cancer.
There was something that came up in your talk that I meant to ask you about in the Q&A and then didn't, because your Q&A went on forever.
My Q&A did go on. It always seems, whenever I do this talk, it goes on for a while.
But so my understanding is that cancer is caused by DNA damage.
Yes.
That has knock-on effects, which eventually you end up, if you build up enough of those mutations, and a lot of it's just randomness. It's if the DNA damage happens to occur in the right place or the wrong place, depending on your point of view, etc. And I can see how smoking can cause DNA damage, and I can see how exposure to ultraviolet can cause DNA damage, etc., etc., etc. For most of the high-risk factors that I know, obesity. I don't understand how obesity causes DNA damage. Or is it just that if you're obese, it's probably because you're not eating a lot of fresh fruit and veg and you're...
I don't think we know a great deal about the exact links, but we know... So obviously we know that obesity increases your risks of lots of other health problems, cardiovascular disease, various other things that might in themselves introduce damage to DNA.
Yeah.
So that might be a big part of it. Also, your route to obesity might be changes in the diet. We do know that eating fruit and vegetables is a big preventative against cancer.
Sure.
So if you're not getting enough of that, if you're not getting enough fiber in your diet and that's contributing to your weight problem, then but we know for sure that obesity is it's the second biggest. It's the second biggest impact. You've got cancer.
Obesity is predictive of cancer.
Yeah.
But we don't necessarily know it's causal. It might be obesity causes X, which causes cancer.
Yeah, that's my understanding of it. I've not looked into the studies on obesity enough to give a full and complete answer.
I'm asking you off the cuff, live on air as well.
But but we definitely know that being overweight increases your risk of being diagnosed with cancer. That is for certain, and it is the second biggest lifestyle factor. That's, after smoking, it's the next big thing.
Yeah. Or indeed, it could be X causes obesity and also causes...
absolutely.
And that's also how
it could be a whole range of things.
I mean, you should know better than to ask these things off the cuff live on air to Alice when her phone is now out of reach in order to be professional.
We know that lifestyle plays a big effect. The study tries to take those lifestyle effects into account, but these are still self-reported data. The participants themselves are required to give accurate information. This might show a true correlation between ultra-processed foods and cancer risk, but it might also show that people who eat a lot of ultra-processed food are more prone to have other unhealthy habits, which might lead to an increased risk of cancer, who might round down their weight or might define as non-smokers even though they smoke every Friday or Saturday night when they go out drinking with their mates. In particular, the authors found significance in food that might well contribute to participants having a higher body weight, fatty or sugary foods. And we know that obesity is the second biggest risk factor for cancer diagnosis after smoking. The authors proposed 4 hypotheses which might explain their findings. Firstly, the poorer nutritional quality of diets and ultra-processed foods. This might make sense since diets poor in fruit and vegetables and diets poor in fibre are known to increase your risk of cancer diagnosis. So if you're not getting a load of those because you're eating ultra-processed foods and you're eating those in the place of foods that would be fruit and vegetables and have high fibre in them, then that might increase your risk of cancer diagnosis. Similarly, the authors point out that these diets might lead to obesity because they're not particularly good at making a person feel satiated. Participants might eat more, and what they're eating is ultra-processed foods high in fat and sugar. For me, this is the most persuasive reasoning because obesity is such a big indicator of cancer risk, and in particular, obesity is related to breast cancer. We know that it plays a particularly large role in diagnosis of breast cancer. And that's the one that they've pulled out from this study. They've said, yes, it increases general risk of getting all types of cancer, but in particular, it's significantly increasing your risk of breast cancer. Diagnosis. So that would make sense. They also point out that high salt intake is linked to some types of cancer, and ultra-processed foods tend to be quite high in salt. The authors discuss all of this, but then seem to dismiss it by saying, however, the associations between ultra-processed food intake and risk of cancer observed in this study were statistically significant despite adjustment for body mass index and remain significant after further adjustment for a Western type dietary pattern and or the energy, fat, sugar and salt content of the diet. So in their statistical modelling, they did try to take these things into account, but there's a whole range of reasons why they've taken it into account as best they can, but can't take it into account completely. Their next hypothesis is to do with additives. They point out that some additives might have adverse effects and that although levels of additives are regulated, there might be an effect of taking in lots of different types of additives from lots of different types of foodstuffs, and that they might combine in an unhealthy way. They point out that mostly this seems just quite controversial depending on the additives, and that further research is required. We've debunked a lot of them before on the show, including aspartame, but that's not to say that there might be a risk of adverse health from some additives that haven't been extensively tested. Their third hypothesis is that some new contaminants might be produced by some of the processes that are used in creating the ultra-processed foods, including some heat treatments. And this, again, is a possibility. In particular, we know that some smoked meats do increase our risk of cancer, which we've talked about in the past, including bacon, which is not as bad as smoking cigarette smoke, but it increases our risk slightly. And we don't know why smoked meats and processed meats in particular increase our risk of cancer, but it has been suggested that perhaps it's some of the compounds generated during the smoking of the meat that might cause the increased risk. We just don't know this yet, and it might be that ultra-processed foods have that same risk there. And their final hypothesis is food packaging, in particular bisphenol A, which, again, we've talked about on the show before. Yes. And we concluded on the show, although we were talking about the levels in receipt paper, where we talked about wetting little tiny mouse feet and putting the receipt paper on the mouse feet. We concluded that it's probably safe in the levels used, and that's what the FDA says as well, that in the levels it's used in packaging, it's safe, but that BPA is carcinogenic, and so releasing it from the plastic packaging in some way, perhaps by melting the plastic, for example, might hold some risk. So that's their four hypotheses: the packaging, the contaminants produced in the processing, the additives, or the nutritional intake. All of which have some level of plausibility, I think. The authors then point out a few strengths and weaknesses of their study, the biggest strength being their cohort size. They've got 105,000 participants, which is a great number. And they also point out that their choice of surveying in this 24-hour window is more useful than other food survey techniques. But they also point out that their cohort consists of a high percentage of women, people who are health conscious, and people who have higher educational and socio-professional levels than the general population, because they're, it's self-selecting. It's people who have been prepared to undertake this online testing, which means their data might not be representative, and that the general cancer incidence of their cohort might already be on the low side.
Sure.
They also point out that they might have misclassified some foods, which is very plausible due to this vague criteria of the NOVA classification, and they acknowledge that the time frame is pretty limited. The problem here is not that the reporting is necessarily inaccurate, though. The Guardian quote study lead Mathilde Touvier saying, "The results are very strong, very consistent and quite compelling, but we have to be cautious. It is the first study. We should not be alarmist. These results need to be confirmed in other prospective studies." Sure, the Daily Mail article was predictably scaremongering, saying, "Packed with chemical additives, the food bears little resemblance to home-cooked meals, and the more of them an individual eats, the higher their risk of cancer of any type."
Good Lord.
But the BBC pointed out that this study is far from the definitive take on ultra-processed foods and cancer. It cannot say ultra-processed foods are a cause of cancer. There are also factors that muddy the waters, as people who ate a lot of ultra-processed foods had other behaviours that have been linked to cancer. They were much more likely to smoke, were less active, consumed more calories overall, and were more likely to be taking the oral contraceptive. But ultimately, the biggest problem with the reporting is that these stories are either directly or indirectly conflating correlation with causation. There are loads of potential reasons certain foods in the diet might be linked to increased risk of cancer. We've discussed a few here: changes in lifestyle or behaviour, changes in body weight or overall health. Just because a single study found a correlation between increased dietary intake of ultra-processed foods and cancer diagnosis does not mean that increased dietary intake of ultra-processed foods causes cancer. We're a long, long way from being able to say that. In fact, when the World Health Organization added processed meat to the IARC list, it asked 22 scientists from 10 different countries to investigate 800 studies on the topic. This is one study. We're a long way from being able to say that one causes the other. So for me, sure, this is interesting observational data, but it's only observational data. The media coverage feeds into such a prominent vilification of certain types of diet and a common idea that if you get sick, it's your own fault. But there are loads of reasons that people might only have access to ultra-processed food. If you have the luxury to eat a healthy and varied diet, great. We know eating a healthy diet is preventative of disease, but eating food is preventative of starvation, and that can be fatal.
Last week contained Valentine's Day, And while that might not mean a lot to a lot of us, I don't really give a shit, and it's not something that we do in our house, it does give the media an opportunity to run a quirky human interest story around the theme of love.
Sure.
And you always see these spring up. If they're not running dodgy PR surveys, they're running these human interest stories about love, really.
I totally forgot it was Valentine's Day this year.
Yeah.
We'd planned to have a date night on the Wednesday night, and we'd said, oh, should we go out for dinner? We've not been out for dinner in ages. And it took us about a week to realise, no, we can't go out for dinner on Valentine's Day. It's town's going to be packed.
That would have been horrendous. So one of those quirky human interest stories in particular leapt out at me for pretty obvious reasons when you see it. We'll take the Daily Mail's version of it for now, although this was extensively covered. So the Daily Mail story ran, woman married to the ghost of an 18th century pirate stuns loose women viewers by claiming they had a pregnancy scare.
There is a lot in that sentence.
Yeah, so Loose Women is a TV show on ITV. Oh, sorry, that wasn't the bit that you were squinting and unsure about. Okay. So a woman who claims to have married a ghost has stunned Loose Women viewers by claiming they had a pregnancy scare. Amanda Teague, 45, from Downpatrick, Northern Ireland, appeared on the ITV daytime show on Wednesday where she claimed to be married to a spirit called Jack.
She's not, though, is she?
A pirate called Jack.
She says the ghost told her that he was a Haitian pirate who died in the 18th century, who is black with jet black hair.
How many Jacks are there in Haiti?
Well, I don't know. I didn't look that up. Black with jet black hair, although she has never seen him.
Of course she hasn't.
That bit's true. 100%
yes.
true. She's never seen him. The pair go on dates together, the article says.
No, they don't.
And she even buys him a glass of rum that he's unable to drink as a sign of respect.
I mean, she buys it, sure. He doesn't drink it.
Well,
fair enough.
She might not even buy it, to be honest. I'm not even sure of that yet. I mean, I'm not sure I'm buying it, let alone she's buying it. The article points out that Amanda works as a Jack Sparrow impersonator.
Okay.
Yeah. A very loose definition of work, one might suggest. But then again, I'm a full-time skeptical investigator, so I can hardly afford to start tugging at those particular threads. But you have to consider her pretty fortunate to be an impersonator of a fictional pirate called Jack, who then fell in love with the ghost of an apparently real pirate called Jack. What are the chances of that, eh? As the article says, Amanda married her spirit lover back in 2016.
She didn't know.
But had to have their nuptials in international waters as the wedding wouldn't be considered legal.
It still isn't.
Yeah. On Loose Women, she revealed how she missed a period, which her GP said could only be pregnancy.
Oh, no, they didn't.
Yeah, no, they didn't. No, that almost certainly did not happen. Amanda explained, I missed a month and went to my GP, and she said, you've got to be pregnant. And I was like, no, I can't be. On further examination, I insisted to get blood tests done. I did speak to Jack about it, and he said, obviously, it's not possible for a spirit to biologically have a child with a human being, so I'm quite safe. Mike?
Okay.
You find that? I mean, I'm doubting a lot of this story so far.
I'm not impressed.
I'm not convinced that the GP said this. I'm not convinced any of these things are
I'm not impressed. I mean, I don't know how an 18th century Haitian pirate knows enough about the biology of spirits, human genetic compatibility.
I mean, that's a good point, but we don't know what he's been doing.
I
mean, he could have been around for a long time. Yeah, he could have been keeping up with the scientific.
Did a crafty medical degree in the first half of the 20th century.
He wouldn't need to do a medical degree. I've not done a medical degree, and I know a little bit about the human reproductive system. I know about at least that much.
You know absolutely nothing about how compatible we are genetically with ghosts.
I think I know everything I need to know about how compatible we are biologically with ghosts. The article continues here. 2 years after they first met, the couple got engaged. I thought it said enraged for a second there. The couple got engaged because she didn't want to have casual sex with a ghost. So
okay.
That's why they got engaged. So that,
right, okay. So she got engaged.
Got engaged to the ghost.
Yes.
Because she didn't want to just have casual sex, because what would that say about her? No, she's got to have it fully above board, this fictional sex she's having with a fictional entity. Amanda previously said that sex with a ghost is similar to sleeping with humans. And
she's doing sex wrong then.
She can feel the pressure when Jack touches her, though she cannot see his face or body. Doggy style? No. She revealed, you can feel the weight of the spirit, their touch, the pressure. You can literally feel the physical act of what the spirit is doing to you, and the spirit can feel it too. I would argue you literally can feel what the spirit is physically doing to you. I think you're absolutely right with that. You can literally feel what the spirit is doing to you. You can literally feel that. Apparently the couple's wedding rings incorporated brass, which is Jack's favourite metal, not gold. He's a pirate who favours brass over gold. What kind of a shit pirate is that? I thought, it should have been made out of a piece of 8.
Should have been made out of a piece of
bait. I don't know. But apparently it's made out of brass, which is his favourite metal, and white gold, which is Amanda's favourite metal. But because Jack can't wear his ring, it's been fitted to a candle, which was used in their wedding ceremony to represent him.
Okay.
So it was just a little ring on a candle there.
Alice has lost it. Alice is gone.
After the wedding, the couple bought their first home together.
No, they didn't. I mean, his name is not on the mortgage.
And even though Jack couldn't contribute financially, presumably because all his money was tied up in some treasure map he'd previously borrowed. It's like a really extreme ISA. It's like my money, your money, in an ISA, your money might be locked away for 2 years. So how long has it been locked away for? Yeah, like 300 years. Yeah, it's locked away, and it's in the Cayman Islands. Yeah, it's buried offshore, very literally buried offshore. He helped pick the new house, apparently, and he even had an input with the interior design. So that's the Daily Mail's coverage, pretty much in its entirety.
Input on the interior design.
Yeah, so you would miss.
Consider sealing this with tar. I find that to be a very, very useful thing. Just seal this up with tar. Yeah, all right, Jack. Not tar again, Jack.
But that was Daily Mail's coverage. This isn't the only coverage that Amanda's Tale of Love got. I did a very quick look. I found the 14th of January 2018, the Daily Star, headline, I fell for 300-year-old pirate. Woman fed up with real men marries ghost. Ghost there in block capitals. Same day, 14th of January 2018, in the Metro, woman marries a ghost after getting fed up with dating humans. Daily Mail, 14th of January 2018, a woman who couldn't find a real husband married the ghost of a 18th century Haitian pirate. So now they're putting the onus, weirdly, the Daily Mail, on her and not the men.
Yes.
Previously,
it was all men were terrible, and now she's like, I mean, I've looked, but I can't, I literally cannot find a husband.
Cannot find a man. I've got to go to a 300-year-old fictional dead man. Newsweek, the story of Amanda Teague and her 300-year-old dead lover. Newsweek did that due diligence. They actually looked up to see whether Jack Teague, because she's taken his name.
Okay,
and it wasn't
right.
Amanda Teague. It was something else. She's taken a Teague. They looked up to see whether Jack Teague existed, and it says that Newsweek could find no evidence of any Jack Teague ever existing.
Of course it couldn't.
But Ancestry.com only goes back as far as 1758, and apparently he died in 1730. He was executed, apparently, according to Amanda, executed helping free slaves.
Of course he was.
Good guy.
Nice bloke, wasn't he?
This Jack Teague,
nice bloke.
Fictional Haitian pirate. 23rd of January 2018, in the Mirror, woman fed up with searching for the perfect man marries ghost of 300-year-old pirate. We're getting more judgment calls on all sides coming out here. We have the Valentine's Day in the Sun. Avast me hearty. Who is Amanda Teague? Woman who married the ghost of a 300-year-old pirate. There's the Sun. You got the one in the Daily Mail that I already covered. The Express. Loose women guest reveals how she met her husband after he died. Quote, I finally accepted it. Accepted what? Oh, intrigue.
Oh, who knows?
Didn't bother clicking to find out. In the Mirror, woman who married a ghost of 300-year-old pirate reveals their bizarre Valentine's Day plans. They were planning to go out on a double date with her friend, who's also going out with a pirate, who's dead.
All right.
So they double date, the two of them, her and her friend, and their two made-up boyfriends.
Do they get a table for four?
They do get a table for four.
Okay.
And apparently Jack wants rum, whereas the other one's fictional dead boyfriend likes beer. So they get a little beer and a little rum, and then they ignore it all night. And that's a date. And then the Daily Star, loose women and men in stitches as guest reveals pregnancy scare from ghost husband. They always put ghost in capital letters. It feels a bit Scooby-Doo. What I want is ghost husband. I don't know. The story was also covered by Snopes, who describes the claim central to the story as, in July 2016, Amanda Teague legally married the spirit of a Haitian pirate who died in the 1700s. And under those terms, Snopes stamps this story as false. But when you look at why, they focus on the fact that the marriage can't be legal, that she's not legally married, because she couldn't have registered the marriage. You've got to register like 3 months in advance and put it on notice so that, and it technically has to be listed somewhere to make sure that you're not bigamist or something along those kind of lines. And she couldn't have done that, so it couldn't have been legal. And also, she couldn't have got like birth certificate or any kind of confirmation details about the husband because he didn't exist. So that's a major issue there.
He'd struggle to sign the marriage certificate, wouldn't he?
Yes, although
there must be ways for you to get legally married without signing a marriage certificate, though.
Well, not to a ghost.
No.
Well,
I mean, they get him a quill.
But there are plenty of people who can't sign marriage certificates who are legally able to get married. So
if
there must be
him
another
a
way of
quill
doing it.
from a dead bird, so he could hold it,
Right, yes.
That would work.
They'd need parchment from like a dead tree. But that's fine because it's all
all right.
So we're fine.
So you can still interact with it.
Weirdly, in researching on this story, I discovered there's actually quite a few countries where marrying the dead is legal. Is absolutely fine. And I think it said it was explicitly allowed. It was specifically written into law in France. That you were allowed to marry the dead.
Right.
But that was because after the First World War, the Second World War, one of the Great Wars.
Yeah.
You had a lot of people who were engaged or were going out with soldiers, and the soldiers died, and so they wanted to be able to be classed as widows and have all of the full benefits of a military widow.
Yes.
So they allowed you to retrospectively have married the guy who's now dead. So it's an entirely understandable situation. And you have a very similar situation in America, where there was a judge who ruled that a guy who died could be married a fortnight after he died, because they were engaged, and it was, again, a widow situation of rights to the widow, which is very, very different to marrying a 300-year-old pirate that we can't see ever existed, let alone you ever met, let alone could have possibly consented to all this. Although he did say "I do" during the ceremony, apparently, through a medium.
Of course.
They had a so it must have been a medium holding a candle, I guess. Anyway, Snopes also pointed out that we can't be sure. It says it took place in international waters, but her story is that they got in a sailing, like in a rowing boat, and rowed out to international waters. But international waters classically is pretty far. And while he might be a very experienced seaman, he's dead. I mean, I don't know whether he was like the navigator.
Yeah.
But she, to all intents and purposes, is only an impersonator of a pirate and not a legitimate pirate. Although we might come back to the distinction shortly. But personally, I sort of think that Snopes is missing the point slightly here by labelling this flat out false. Because yes, legally they aren't married, but it's certainly the case that she's claiming to be married. And if you believe her claims that she's a pagan, you could get into areas around the fact that she undertook a pagan wedding ceremony. And even if that isn't recognised by the law, could you say she married someone? Well, you get into kind of all sorts of like interesting common law stuff. And, you know, there's a historic precedent for people who couldn't get married under the law getting married in traditional folk ceremony and that counting. So I think regardless of the legalities, I think that Snopes are kind of focusing on the wrong part of this story by saying, well, the reason this woman didn't marry a 300-year-old ghost of a pirate is because legally she wasn't allowed to. That's not the reason. That's not the primary reason why, for me. Because the thing is, in the future, when people look back at this story, they'll see that Snopes declared it false that a woman married a ghost, and they'll think that they'll put their own view of what that means if they don't necessarily read the story. So, apparently, here's a woman who married a ghost. Oh, it's false. She didn't marry a ghost, but they won't necessarily know why. However, I think there are better reasons to consider this story false, or at least not to take it at face value, beyond the obvious thing that ghosts aren't real. And that this pirate guy probably didn't exist. And if so, he wouldn't have wanted to marry her, I imagine, because mediums don't work, that kind of thing. Firstly, when she described meeting her beloved, her betrothed, she told one interview, "I was involved in spirituality for about 9 years, so for me to communicate with the spirit was quite natural. I was in the middle of writing a book, which is very much based on piracy and the 1700s at the time."
Was she?
So she's a medium who is writing a book about pirates. That strikes me as a pretty important detail to miss in pretty much all of the stories here. So I looked her up on Facebook. Her page is facebook.com/Jack Sparrow Impersonator Island. Actually, weirdly, it's Jack Sparrow Impersonator Island. There's like a spare I or an L knocking around in there. I'm not quite sure why. So once I'd found her on Facebook, I noticed she tagged herself in a life event. And the life event went viral. And the message she tagged in this went viral was, "It may seem a bit egotistical to add this as a life event, but you know what? Why not? When I started Elisa Rose Publicity, I wanted to promote things I felt passionate about. Over the years, I've been involved in several projects, but this one is the biggest. Over 2.5 million views on one video alone, not to mention Island AM, Independent IE, Loose Women, several European appearances, magazines, blogs and newspapers. As an author and spiritual tutor, there is an obvious offshoot from all of this, and hopefully will also help the Animal Trust, that when the book comes out, whose proceeds will go towards animal welfare. I'm an older woman, confident enough not to let negativity sway me in all the things I feel passionate about. So as they say, all publicity is good publicity, so I say it's win-win, blessed be." So there's a pretty strong element here of a publicity stunt.
Just a PR stunt,
given that it's a medium who is writing a book about pirates. It seems like it's a PR stunt for her book and also for her mediumship company, which is called Lighthouse Lightworkers. They've got a Facebook page of their own. They list their services, Lighthouse Lightworkers. They do spell work. that you can buy. It doesn't give you the price on there, but it said if there's something you need to manifest in your life, a spell might be the helping hand you need.
All right,
they'll tailor-make a spell to meet the client.
That's what spell work is, not like necessarily. Okay, N-E-C. It's one C and two S's, isn't it?
Yeah, not like Jack Sparrow impersonator. It's like, is that two I's in impersonator? Memorials. If a beloved pet has passed away, they'll do a memorial service. Banishings and clearances. If you're experiencing something that doesn't feel right, it may be an unwelcome attachment that needs to be cleared. I think the acorn hasn't fallen far from the tree there. They should get your own house in order first to deal with the mort in your own eye. Hand fastings. Hand fasting is a traditional form of marriage. It's still very popular in Scotland, apparently.
Okay.
And so they do those. Mediumship, they do mediumship, connect with loved ones. They do readings, angel, oracle, tarot cards, spiritual connections, New Year readings, healing energies from sources, aura cleansing, chakra rebalancing, animal whispering. So if something's going on with your pet, communicating with them might get to the bottom of the problem. If you had that, you could have found out that Marwood was constipated in advance.
Yeah.
You could have got to the bottom of the problem.
Had them have a little whisper to him, and he could really need a shit.
Yeah.
Instead, he went, wah! Which is cat for, I really need a shit.
Yeah. And they also do lots of workshops for archangel workshops, trance workshops, witchcraft, deities, ancestors, protection, past lives, lucid dreaming, astral traveling, beginners and advanced spiritual awakening, and understanding death. That's all of the services that is sold on the website of Lighthouse Lightworkers, run by the medium and author of a book about pirates who says she's having sex with a 300-year-old ghost in the news here. So what are we dealing with here? Well, either this is someone who genuinely thinks they're having sex with and are married to a ghost, in which case I don't think the media should necessarily be getting them on just to laugh at them. It seems very mean-spirited and not psychologically helpful to put them on a public parade just to laugh at them. Or we've got a medium who has successfully fooled the media into promoting her across an international platform, in which case it's probably the medium and not the media who will have the last laugh.
So we have a listener question. We've not done a listener question for a while.
It has been a while, hasn't it?
We need.
I've done a proper one for a while.
We have just currently discovered that we need more listener questions. So we should use this as an opportunity to ask listeners for more questions. But we have a question from Alex Murdoch on Twitter, who asked, has your skepticism changed your ability to enjoy certain celebrities, for example, a musician or an actor?
I struggle to watch Jim Carrey movies. Since
is he a woo?
Anti-vax.
Yeah, he was going out with Jenny McCarthy at the height of her weird anti-vaxxiness.
I don't know much about many celebrities
or films,
or films or anything. So it very infrequently comes up for me.
Yeah, but it must do though, because you love Buffy and Sarah Michelle Gellar's.
She's a bit of a woo.
Is she anti-vax or anti-GMO?
Anti-GMO, I think she does this food thing. She's set up a food-based company.
Yeah.
She's a bit woo.
See, I don't mind too much. I think I can get away with a lot of it. I can even watch Gwyneth Paltrow in films and not be like, Gwyneth Paltrow. Gwyneth Paltrow.
Oddly enough, I don't mind Gwyneth Paltrow in kind of the Iron Man films because all the goop stuff kind of happened post Iron Man.
Yeah.
And so it's it's fine. It doesn't matter.
But she's not done anything since Goop, has she?
Her film career is not really at its heights at the moment, is it? She's off being goopy.
She's all goopy. Yeah. But I think, generally speaking, it doesn't really bother me too much. But there is one that really, really winds me up, and it really upsets me. And it's Annie Hardy from the band Giant Drag. Oh, God, it upsets me no end. So Giant Drag are a fairly niche kind of punkish indie band from America.
Yep.
Who, their first album, Hearts and Unicorns, is one of my favourite albums of all time. It was very small, not a particularly well-known album, but one of my favourite albums of all time. Absolutely love that record. Listen to it almost constantly. Well, listen to it very, very regularly.
Yeah.
But because Alice is on Instagram.
And you sent me Giant Drag and I liked Giant Drag.
Yeah, you looked at Annie Hardy.
I follow lots of random people on
And the thing is, Annie Hardy's like an interesting, weird, esoteric character anyway, and she's very sardonic, and I always got the feeling, and she's had a lot of very odd stuff go on in her life, and had a lot of kind of personal tragedy, like a huge amount of personal tragedy, and all sorts of stuff like that. So when I've seen her say some weird things on Twitter, for example, I've thought, she's probably taking the piss when she mentions, like, the lizards. She's probably taking the piss
lizards.
when she's mentioning, like, lizards and stuff. And then you started sending me screenshots of of Instagram.
Things she posts on Instagram, yeah.
And how she bought like a Kangen water machine.
She
and
has
she was
a
like
Kangen water
promoting
machine.
that. And she's like the chemtrails.
Yeah, she's very, very woo.
And it's so hard because she's weird and brilliant, or at least her first album, that album was. But yeah, that's the most upsetting one for me, I think. And I don't think I don't think there's anyone else that I get.
It's always nice when you find out that somebody's like on the right side.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, there's a few celebrities that you expect to be full on woo. You just for some reason have an inkling that they're going to believe all sorts of bollocks, and then they come out as like pro-vaccination, or they suddenly seem really switched on about science.
Kristen Bell.
Kristen Bell's very good.
I was worried that she'd be wrong because I saw the article which was like, what these celebrity mums have to say about vaccines. I'm like, oh God.
No,
and then it's like 8-9 of them were pro-vaccination. Salma Hayek, well done. J-Lo, well done. I saw J-Lo did an advert for, I think, pertussis, not for the vaccine for pertussis.
Try pertussis.
I seem to remember, I could be wrong, but I thought I remembered seeing a one where she was like, hi, I'm J-Lo. If you want to know what to think about pertussis, don't listen to me, but my brother's a doctor. Listen to him. I'm sure it was something like that. Nice. If it wasn't J-Lo, it was certainly another kind of American actress who just handed it over to her family member who was an actual qualified person, sort of said, as a celebrity, don't listen to me, listen to the experts. We've got to take their advice on things.
Yeah.
Do you see are there any woos that you would like, any people who you respect?
There must be some woos in Doctor Who.
And sci-fi and stuff.
Yeah, there's Louise Jameson, who played Leela in the 70s, and she was Rosa DeMarco in EastEnders in kind of the early 2000s. And she is a patron of the British Homeopathic Association.
Really? Yeah.
Which is like,
so's Beckham.
That's a shame. There's also Robert Newman, the comedian Robert Newman, who used to be a comedy partner with David Baddiel in the late 80s, early 90s, and they were absurdly difficult to get over how absurdly huge Newman and Baddiel were late 80s, early 90s. First comedians to sell out Wembley Stadium. Now everyone does it every 10 minutes, but at the time it was like absurd that a comedian would sell out Wembley Stadium. And following their big breakup, because apparently by the time they finished, they despised each other.
Yeah.
And they basically was like, well, we've got this Wembley gig book, let's just get it out of the fucking way. So they did the Wembley gig. David Baddiel went off and became a comedy partner with Frank Skinner and did Fantasy Football League.
A woo to the point that I just intensely dislike Frank Skinner.
Yes.
He was the one who said that atheists pose a bigger threat to the world than global warming.
Yes, he was. Yeah.
Fucking moron.
So David Baddiel went off and did that and did like Fantasy Football League and Baddiel and Skinner, etc., etc., etc. Rob Newman kind of disappeared and went underground, and he
almost literally underground.
Yeah.
Like so eating out of bins underground.
He kind of does, very niche stuff now. He's very much into ecology, veganism,
which is all fine,
etc., 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 which is all good. But also, he's done 2 stand-up shows recently. One talking about how Charles Darwin got evolution completely wrong, and evolution scientists got evolution completely wrong. And one recently about neurology, how neurologists they've got it all wrong.
Yeah.
And it's just based on his massive straw man misunderstanding of those fields of science. The criticisms he's making would be valid if it weren't for the fact that he's basically a massive straw man that he's built around this. Is just showing his own lack of, and he's a smart guy, Robert Newman, but he doesn't recognise that actually you don't know what you're talking about in these fields, and so he's just knocking down straw men, which is a shame because I used to like Robert Newman. You look back at some of his comedy he did with David Baddiel and you're like, oh, fucking hell, actually, that's not a good idea.
Yeah.
But I did have a lot of time for Robert Newman, and he's kind of knocked that down as well, which is a shame.
But that hasn't affected. Presumably that doesn't affect your view of the work that he was doing or the art that he was doing, because you don't like the stuff that he's doing on this, but you would. But it seems different when it's like
it's disappointing. Because I liked him a lot, and it's like, oh, that's kind of a shame. He did a really good show that I enjoyed called History of Oil, which was he kind of constructed a conspiracy theory around the Iraq War, where he argued that the Iraq War was a punishment beating that America was administering to Iraq because they had decided to trade their oil priced in euro instead of priced in dollars. And if it were the case that OPEC would unilaterally switch all trading from US dollars to euros, then every major bank of every country around the world would have to flush all of the US dollars out of their vaults that they currently keep for buying oil, because at the moment all oil is bought in US dollars. They would have to sell all of those dollars in order to buy euros, so they had currency in order to buy oil. That would cause a glut of the dollar on the international money markets, cause a collapse in the value of the dollar, thrust the United States into a depression worse than the one seen in the 1920s, caused essentially the collapse of American society. And therefore, to stop that happening, the Iraq War happened as a punishment beating, America protecting their cartels, saying, if you want to buy oil, you come through us. And I enjoyed the show, and the show was entertaining. The conspiracy theory was a bit,
I mean, you're going to have to put some real evidence.
We need some data on this. We need some evidence on this.
That's an interesting hypothesis, but at the moment that's pure speculation based on very little. But I don't think that necessarily fills the remit of the question, though, because it's different finding out that someone whose comedy you'd have watched in the late 90s is woo with mad ideas now.
Yeah. That's
different to someone who's to finding out that one of the doctors in real life thinks they're psychic and sells psychic readings. Now whenever I watch the doctor do that, you've got to think, but in real life you're a nutter.
Yeah, true.
I think that's the difference is damage. The people who you realise are actively damaging people through their opinions, either through being so famous that them promoting their opinions, say if they're anti-vax and are promoting their opinions and are lending their voice to those opinions, then that is potentially actively damaging people. And then the other thing is it's obviously particularly topical at the minute with a lot of the Me Too stuff coming out. There's there are a lot of actors and directors whose work I can no longer enjoy because of the allegations
Kevin
against
Spacey's
them.
a hard one for that, because what he did in real life
and
was
it's because
awful.
of the damage
and the films that he's made some fantastic films, but what he's done in real life is awful.
Yeah,
it's like fuck, people are grim.
So, Liverpool Skeptics in the Pub is a week today. That is the 1st of March. That's our social event. That's taking place in Dr. Duncan's from 8 p.m. So if you're in the Liverpool area, you should come along to that.
Our socials have been particularly enjoyable lately.
They've been quite busy recently. It's been nice.
We've been getting good numbers and it's been nice.
It's been exciting.
We've had a few new faces. It's been good.
So come to the social. That's the 1st of March in Dr. Duncan's. And Marsh, we've got a new episode of Be Reasonable available as well.
Yes. So the new episode is out on Monday, the last Monday in February here, and I really don't want to say too much about it.
You've been excited about this one for ages.
Yeah. So it's an interview with a chap who is a Hollow Earth believer.
Yes.
I think people who like Be Reasonable will like it. People who don't normally listen to Be Reasonable might want to listen to this one because it's an interesting take on things.
Yeah, I don't usually listen to Be Reasonable, but from what you've told me of this episode, I will listen to this episode.
Yeah, it was a fun. I haven't listened to it back since I edited it or since I put it together. But yeah, I'd be interested to see I'd be interested to see their reaction to the whole show.
Yeah.
And B, I'd be interested to watch their reactions throughout the course of the because I was chatting to Eli Bosnick the other day, and I said I kind of wanted to play it to him whilst I could watch him listen to it, just to see his reactions in real time.
The dusk till dawn scale twist that comes halfway through the interview.
I mean, I'm not saying anything about it, but yeah.
So you'll find that on the Merseyside Skeptics website, and of course you'll find that in iTunes and Stitcher and the usual places. We've had a few people write into us and say, can we add the podcast to Google Play? And we'd love to, but they haven't launched in the UK yet. And so we have to jump through some stupid hoops and VPNs and nonsense and faff in order to get it into the US version. Which is frustrating. But as soon as Google Play launches podcasts in the UK, we'll be there. Don't worry about it. We'll absolutely be on that platform. If there are any other podcasting platforms you think that we should be on, by all means, let's send an email through to us and say, hey guys, can you register for this one and that one? And we'll sign up for as many as we can, because we want to spread the word far and wide. People need to listen to more of our shit.
People need this show, Mike. You're right. People need this show.
It's therapeutic, isn't it?
Yeah.
Aside from that, then, that is all we have time for. All that remains is for me to thank Marsh for coming along today.
Thank you.
And thank you to Alice.
Thank you.
We have been Skeptics with a K, and we will see you next time.
Bye now.
Bye.
Skeptics with a K is a production of the Merseyside Skeptics Society. For more information, visit our website www.merseysideskeptics.org.uk or email podcast@merseysideskeptics.org.uk.